Hello and welcome back to the only show that was going to write a joke about having a bad motivator but didn't see the point and didn't have the energy. I'm Max.
I'm Matt.
I'm Luke.
And this is Force for Thought.
It's always a risky move to hype up a joke before you tell it because you get the expectations high, but boy, when it hits,
You liked it?
I liked
was
that
good.
joke.
All right, I'm glad. Because it was also very real. I came up with that about 30 minutes ago, and I was really struggling to come up with one. So, glad to have stumbled upon that. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Today we are doing a ranking of some of our favorite droids in all of Star Wars. We did our top 5 lists, so as per usual, one of us behind the scenes compared notes to make sure we didn't have any overlap. But a lot of our lists got pretty shredded. So
As it turns out, there's only out of all the IP in Star Wars, there's only 6 really good droids.
yeah, I agree with that. But there's
There's
a
a lot
couple
we're
that were
talking
really
about.
missing from your guys' lists that I
Well, I'm not going to.
am curious.
I can't.
I put relatively little prep time into this than I normally like to, so I'm worried I forgot some big ones
How
like that.
little was it when you came down here and said, I am ill prepared for this?
I would say about 35 seconds worth of prep time.
We're starting with our number 5s and working backwards. So the listener has to listen for our number 1s and 2s and 3s. But I'm really worried the one of two things are going to happen once we start talking about these is you guys are going to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that person, in which case it's going to piss me off. Or you guys disagree that this is a top 5 droid, and that's also going to piss me off. So either way, I'm already upset.
I want to name names now, but I can't because it's wait.
Okay. So I think you probably know a couple that I'm okay.
I know at least one that
we'll get into it with our number 5s and work our way back.
I think here's the thing too is that I was thinking it's hard to talk about. I'll bring it back up, but
Does it relate to your number 5? Because we can just get right into it.
man, I wish it did. It does not though.
Bummer.
But
Luke, does it relate to your number 5?
No.
No.
how does he know what I was going to say?
I don't know. I thought maybe he had a good idea.
I guess maybe it relates to my number 5.
I was just
I'll
going to
go
say
first. It's the Gonk droid. Does that relate to what you were going to say?
No, but that's a good one.
All right.
No, it is fucking not.
Yes, it is.
We're about to get the 15 best droids in Star Wars, and your number 5 is Gonk droid.
The humble Gonk.
Yeah, what are
yes.
you going to... That is an iconic droid, I feel like. You
The
can't...
fact that that was on your list, though, you had your top 8, and
Top 9.
there was a lot on there that were not included before you got to Gonk droid, and that kind of upsets me. But regardless,
Oh, I'm sorry. I see what you were talking about. On my notes that I scribbled down in 35 seconds and then I transcribed for you, I did leave off my number 3. And I bet that's one of the ones that you were talking about.
okay, I hope so.
I do apologize. This
because
Gonk
you knew
was-
they were going to be covered.
well, I'm glad they are, but
That is what I was going to say. Yeah, I feel like going into this, I was
Okay.
like, I know that a certain droid from Rebels will probably be on this list.
Okay, yes, as they should be,
Sure.
but was notably absent from both of your lists.
Yeah, but
so,
to me, for
okay.
that specific droid that we will talk about, I don't have an emotional connection to that droid.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we will get there.
Anyway, we're not giving enough time to the Gonk
around
droid.
number 3. I think that's the
Gonk.
appropriate amount of time to Gonk. Do you
No.
really have
No.
much else to say
It
about
is-
Gonk
it's a
droid?
great-
lore-wise, it's funny that you put a battery not on wheels but on legs and give him
Yes.
sentience. I think that's just
You didn't
silly
say
and wacky and
Garbage can.
fun. What?
I feel like it's a garbage can.
Yeah, like practically
Yeah.
the prop that they built, it looked like a garbage can that someone sat in. They were
Yes.
like, "Oh, but my legs need to come out."
Yeah.
So they gave him little robot legs.
I think Kenny Baker was in there too.
I doubt it, just because I feel like every story I've ever heard about Kenny Baker is just how horribly they treated him.
Yeah,
I
that's
feel
why
like
I feel like they put him in a Gonk
I feel like
droid.
they shoved him in the R2 droid and then did not let him out or speak for the next 9 hours.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the Gonk droid, big fan. He got a lot of more screen time in the Bad Batch, which makes me happy. But also, in a weird way, seeing a meme droid used as a meme droid in universe kind of takes the meme out of it.
Yeah,
But I not so much that I don't love him. Still a top 10 droid for sure.
yeah, I like the Gonks.
All right. Matthew, your number 5?
Mine is the probe droid. Yeah, same thing with the Gonk droids. I feel like the probe droid, when I was a kid, I feel like that is an iconic scene on Hoth. I feel like you want to know more about that droid. It's spooky. I also think it is a little scary with the legs and stuff. I don't like spiders. I mean, who does? That's not really a hot take thing to say, but I feel like it looks cool. But then really when you think about it, and those things are actually huge too, I feel like. So like when you're if you were actually faced with that, I think it would be a little bit of a spooky droid.
Yeah, it has a great Imperial aesthetic. I was really glad when I saw that somebody had this on their list
Yeah.
because I had it as one of my honorable mentions. But
It's good.
I agree with it. I think it is one of the coolest droids. It's one of the few droid action figures that I have because I just think it looks really cool. I agree. The spider legs and the way it floats, it's dangly. And yeah, I don't know why. I like in Star Wars when certain things just have like a very certain aesthetic.
Yeah.
And it's like the Empire has a lot of certain droids, and that one just seamlessly fits in.
I think it's funny you're just touching on that too, but I also feel like the Empire does they do droids better. I mean, there's a reason that I feel like
It's because they knock out all that annoying sentience.
Yeah.
Just do what I'm telling you to do and shut up. Don't talk.
They just have spookier droids.
I also like the probe droid. I like the sequence in Empire Strikes Back with the probe droid, but I almost feel like that's one of the worst parts of the probe droid, just because, like, in my mind, I'm thinking particularly in, I don't remember if it was Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor, but there are probe droids in it, and they're like, just the presence of them, they're huge,
Yeah.
and you don't really get that scale on Hoth because you don't see it next to any objects or anything. It's just in the snow.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see it, like, racing through a city, flying, spinning its head around, like, as a purely practical point of view, like, it is an incredible weapon for the Empire to use to get intel. It can cover so much space and get so many angles, and it's just really, like, menacing to see walking or flying by. And yeah, the size of it is really underlooked, because when Han even says, like, I didn't hit it hard, it must have self-destructed, I remember growing up, I always thought, well, I mean, you shot it. Like, it's not like you threw a rock at it. You hit it kind of hard. But no, that thing can definitely tank one shot from a DL-44. That is an appropriate statement for Han to make.
Do you think that when they were having this discussion, they're like, I don't know if we're going to see scale or size or anything. Do you think they're like, well, we can always build trenches in the snow, just like they did with the Death Star?
It worked in the first
Yeah,
one.
they're like, "Oh, let's just do that again."
That's funny. Moving on to my number 5, I had Ned B from Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, that's a good one.
He was not the only droid in the Kenobi show, but he was definitely the best droid in the Kenobi show. He is not the only droid, I guess, but the droid that doesn't speak. And I think that they use that really well, because they make a whole point about that, about how actions speak louder than words. And then in the end, he uses himself as like I was going to say human sacrifice, but a droid sacrifice, basically a meat shield for his friend.
Yeah.
Friend?
Yeah, friend.
Okay.
Not owner, if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I don't know. What is...
No,
yeah.
they were friends. They were colleagues.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think you just do that.
What was her name?
Talia?
Memorable character.
Yeah. But I was going to say also about Ned B is I also feel like he was in the show the perfect amount.
Yes.
Because he wasn't like, he didn't blow anyone out of the water, but for as little as he was in there, he did have an impact to the story. He did have his own little theme and message that went along with it, and he did have a lot of emotional impact for less than 10 minutes worth of screen time for sure. Probably less than 5 total. But
He's one of those characters I wish didn't die in the miniseries, because I feel like that'd be an interest. I mean, you could revive that sort of droid, I guess, in other IP.
I thought we were going to see it in Ahsoka, because they talk about loader droids when they're in the Imperial shipyard. We never did see one.
I'm glad that they did kill him off, though, because I feel like that was really the best way to get that emotional impact out of it. I feel like if he had just lived, then it would have been like, well, okay, that was just another droid that was kind of within
I definitely
there.
would have cared less about Ned B had he not done what he did.
Did you know Kevin Smith played him?
Did he really?
No, he's just Silent Bob. It's just,
that's funny.
Sorry.
I wish that were true now. Well, he's a huge Star Wars fan, so for a second I was like, that's possible.
And
Why not?
As I said it, I was like, this isn't even a joke.
It's just a lie.
Yeah, because I was like, the character that the actor plays the other character.
I am also a big fan of Ned B. He was pretty high on my list, and I'm sad I didn't get to be the one to bring him forward, because he is a good example of, like, similar to my love of Kit Fisto or like Matt with CC10. I have the Ned B toy, and it's a lot of fun. It's like it's a fine toy. It's just the one that I've played with the most in the last several years. I don't know why I gave that one to my son instead of keeping it for myself, probably because it's just such a solid toy. It's like heavier and thicker. Like a toddler won't break it as easily as other Black Series toys. But I play with my Ned B toy far more than any other Star Wars toy at this point in my life, and so I just have very positive feelings towards Ned B because of that. And yeah, like everything Max was saying with the actions speak louder than words, that's obviously not a new sentiment in literature or media or anything, or even Star Wars, but it's rarely done quite as well, where it's like, yeah, we all say, and we've heard 1,000 times, like actions speak louder than words, but you rarely see someone literally silent and make such a massive impact like that. And also the sequence when Darth Vader arrives on not Jabeam, the planet where where Leia gets taken from,
Yeah.
where he goes and snaps necks, where Ned B gets introduced, and it's a great editing or directing move. I don't know which one, but Ned B is silent, obviously, and it's interesting to like create tension around him because he also doesn't have facial expressions or much movement. But when I forget what happens, like a stormtrooper comes up and Ned B is just holding his hammer behind his back, and then it just pans down to it, and he doesn't even tighten his grip or anything because he's a droid. It just like lingers on it just the right amount. I love that sequence.
Because he was telling him something. I forget what order the stormtrooper was barking at him, but he kept saying something like basically ordering him to speak. And he was just holding that hammer, and you thought he was about to start wailing on him, and then someone else comes in at the last second and bails out the stormtrooper and says like, "Oh, it's just a loader droid. Like they're whatever. They're stupid. They don't even talk. Let's just get going." I forget what the writing was. Probably wasn't much better than that, but it was something to that effect.
What a random grenade to throw at Kenobi in the middle of this.
I can't compliment that show too much, except I do. I like that show. Anyway. Moving
you at
on.
least like the sequence. It's okay to not like a show. There are still elements of it that we can praise.
No, I would say overall, I like that show. I just don't like certain sequences. But regardless.
So you're just really being an asshole. Then.
I am. I told you I started this day off in a bad mood looking at this list. So
we are low energy. We're angry today.
Number 4, starting. Let's go with Matthew.
Mine are the Manga Guards.
Magna Guards?
Yes, I like them.
Yeah.
They're cool.
I don't know how high it would be on my list if I remembered them. I did not think about them, but those are so cool. Their wrists spin freely, so they can spin their thing like a Inquisitor lightsaber.
And every single video game, they are a bitch to fight. But they're a blast. There's one of those things where I feel like a lot of my list is just kind of boring, to be honest, because it's spoiler, my droids either have personalities or like some sort of emotional connection. I guess that's kind of a wide range. It's not even an emotional connection, but I feel like when you growing up, these are the action figures that you wanted to play with. If you had a droid. As much as I love like 3PO or R2, they're not as fun to play with, right? Like,
yeah. I'm really glad that you had Magna Droid. I was very taken aback by it, but I had in my list a lot of generic droids that we can talk about in the honorable
very
mentions.
Interested, yeah.
But the one thing that I really like about the Magna Guards is it's the only droid in all of Star Wars where if you cut off the head, they're still okay.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time seeing that, and I was like, oh my God, what is this witchcraft? And as I got older, I'm just like, that is stupid that doesn't apply for every
All
droid in
droids?
Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, why do they make them so lifelike in that, oh, if you just cut off the head, they're done? But like,
right, keep the CPU in the foot or something.
Yeah. Which clearly they did, and I don't know. And when they did that, and then there's that whole thing about Obi-Wan revealing it or whatever, so they're like still spinning behind him.
Maybe there should be
So cool.
a movie to. There's Galen Erso also. That was
Galen Erso designed the Death Star and the Magna Guard.
Yeah.
That's actually how he got his start with the Empire. He was just in the pitch meeting for that, and he was like, "Why do we keep the CPU in the head?
He designed all the other droids.
All the ones that are easier to kill."
Yes, yeah.
I like the Magna Droid in the sense that it shows an appropriate power escalation in the prequels from episode 1, 2 to 3, where the B1 battle droid obviously needed an upgrade to the B2 super battle droid. And then in a lesser version of Revenge of the Sith, I feel like they could have made a B3 extra super battle droid, and it was just bigger and stronger. And I like that they turned to something more original and still stronger and badder, but a lot more unique.
Yeah. Skeletal.
Number 4, Luke.
Number 4, the B1 battle droid, Roger himself. I feel like I don't have that much to say. I feel like Matt when we talk about other stuff where it's just like old reliable. Like you got to talk about Roger. It's a classic. It's
a gut thing.
Yeah.
These are the ones that I don't like.
You don't like the B1 battle droid?
I think it's one of those things where it feels like a punchline more than anything. And I feel like they just created a whole, instead of stormtroopers being kind of menacing and scary in the original trilogy, you have to do something different. But I think they just went completely opposite with these droids, and they're just like punchlines, and I don't know. They just don't, in a very serious era, they feel so campy and weird. I just don't think those to me never jived. Like the super battle droids, things like
what
that.
Do you mean serious era? It's definitely
Like,
the least serious era.
Well, I think that's like in the time where the Sith are going to take over, It's
like the Clone Wars, yeah.
Yeah, like all that stuff is like serious and dark, and obviously it's coded kind of in like this weird like fart joke era, like esqueness of like the early 2000s, and I just feel like that never really gelled. Like if the prequels were made, I feel like 5 years before or like 5 years later, all that stuff would be different. I don't think we would have the Roger Rogers.
Oh, well, that would
the
devastate me.
Roger Rogers would be a really good like punk Star Wars band. The Roger Rogers.
Yeah, no notes. B1 Battle Droid is a classic.
They're hilarious.
Obviously, we grew up in the prequel era, so we have a nostalgic attachment to them and everything like that. I like that they fold up and how they kind of come out and they're all controlled by a central command center. I don't know. It's so silly talking about droids because, like, obviously these are so unrealistic, but every now and then I'm just like, yeah, that is how that would work. That makes sense.
Yeah, I won't dwell on this one too long because I feel like I have least to say about it from all my others, but it's great. I quite like it.
Number 4 for myself is B2 EMO, the droid from Andor. Very, I don't even know how to describe him.
Captivating.
I was gonna say captivating. I was gonna say emotional, but he isn't emotional. But he has like a lot of emotion that he brings to it. But he's such an interesting droid because he has like a weird stutter. He's very slow. He seems very annoying to me. He's kind of like that friend's
like
dog
me.
that's like 16 years old and is like crusty, and like every time you go over their house you're like, wow, that thing is still alive, huh?
It's exactly like that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I like that. Like it's like a much different take on that droid, and they were still able to give the droid a good like kind of purpose and, well, you know what I mean, like a good story beats within Andor. Obviously he's the one who records Marva's message and then plays it for the town hall.
Great
and
plot
everything.
relevance.
Yeah, exactly.
Max, you put so much more thought into this than Luke and I, because that is a great choice.
I had B2 EMO on mine.
All right, Max and Luke.
But thank you. I'm glad to hear at least one concession so far, because there's more like that. But
I also I remember when Andor first
good droid.
started, and I had seen like pictures of the droid, and I was like, oh, that's a neat droid design. And then he started talking. I was like, oh my god, this is completely different than I expected. Like he's definitely an R2 chopper kind of design and look and feel. And then when he started talking, it like almost took me out of it for a minute. But yeah, his dialogue was just so, with like all of Andor. Like I don't know how much of it is how amazing Andor is versus how amazing B2 EMO is. I mean, obviously there's a correlation there, but in most other shows, I don't think B2 would make our lists. But because the dialogue is also amazing, I remember I said it in our Andor review, but the part of Andor that gets me most emotional every time I watch it is at the end when Cassian says that he needs B2MO to come through for him, and he says, "You always say that," and then Cassian says, "And you always do," and that makes me tear up every time.
It's very good.
He's just so sad, and then his mom died, and that's devastating.
It is.
Brasso wants to take care of him, but but B2 refuses to leave the house, so Brasso stays at Marva's house with him, and it's
the fact that we can
every time he's in it.
The fact that we can name Brasso though, and not like the person who is in Kenobi is
it was
not
Tala. It's Tala.
Yeah.
I named it.
We're like 99% there on
I
that
think
one.
with that droid specifically,
I
like
just rewatched Andor.
yeah. You've never seen a droid that is definitely on antidepressants, I feel like.
Another thing about that droid too that I'm just like, oh, that makes sense. Doesn't he have like a little charging station that he has to like go back to
frequently?
Yeah. And in my head, I'm just like, I know that's not real, but I'm like, oh, that's a bitch. I know that. Like I feel like that's what my droid has to do.
Like huge too. It's not like a small thing you put in the corner. Like,
no, it's not. Just
that thing.
It's like
it
a
has
whole
like
bed.
Yeah, I mean, he like rolls around on 2 giant tank treads. Like he is not a small droid.
No.
Everything about him screams inconvenience, and he has like basically no utility. Like I really don't know what he does, but he's still
he
such
moves
a
up
good
and
part
down.
of the.
I just hope they don't have any house pets.
Do you think when they named him, when they were designing him, they had the conversation like, "I'm worried he might be too emo," and they were like, "Say that again."
I was just about to make the Fan Four Stick joke too. What was that?
That's funny.
All right, moving on to number 3s. My number 3, I had Chopper. I actually did not prepare a whole lot to say about Chopper because I was convinced that Luke was going to have this one at least number 1 or 2.
Yeah.
But Chopper, obviously the droid from Rebels, and then we got to see him in live action in Ahsoka. Amazing. He is funny. Very. You utilitarian. I don't know. He's very useful in just about any situation. And he's a war criminal, almost certainly. There's like a lot of jokes online about how like Chopper has more like confirmed deaths than whatever Luke Skywalker from blowing up the Death Star, because he's kind of just like a maniac and everything. And they kind of pay like a little homage to that in the Ahsoka show when they're chasing down the ship as it's leaving the factory or whatever, and he says, "Why don't we just shoot it down?" And Ahsoka says, or Hera says, "We can't just shoot it down. There's people below us," or whatever. And Chopper doesn't talk, but you can kind of make out what he's like trying to say.
Yeah.
And his response was like, "Is that bad?" or "So what?" or whatever. He does not care. Like he's just
I have
very.
not rewatched Rebels since Ahsoka came out. Is his dialogue like that in Rebels, where you can like, if you know the gist of what he's trying to say, you can hear it in the mumbles? Because
Yes.
I definitely noticed that in Ahsoka, and I don't remember ever noticing it in Rebels.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. And
like
who does the voice work for that?
Dave Filoni.
It is Dave Filoni.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was
This
going to say
dude's
the
got
guy
to spend
from.
his time in other things.
I was gonna say the guy from Parks and Rec. What's his name? Ben Schwartz. Doesn't he do some sort of?
John Ralphie. I mean, Ben Schwartz is his
Yeah.
real name.
This is gonna sound really stupid
did
if I'm wrong.
BB-8.
He did. Okay. I was
Him-
gonna say I thought he did some work
It
for
was
BB-8's
him and
voice.
Bill Hader, but I don't think they used anything. In it.
Okay. Interesting.
It's definitely Dave Filoni that voices Chopper, though.
It is.
Mm-hmm. I remember he talked about it at a con or something, but it was like a secret. It wasn't revealed until the finale or so of Rebels. It always said in the credits Chopper as himself. And at one con, Dave Filoni was talking about how some kid asked him who voices Chopper, and Dave Filoni like leaned in and was like, "It's me, but you can't tell anyone." And the kid was just like, "Oh, all right." Didn't react or care at all.
Dave Filoni was like, "No, wait. This is actually a big reveal, kid. I gotta
Right.
explain this more to you." He's so disappointing.
Yeah.
Oh, especially for Dave Filoni, because he's been waiting for that moment his entire Rebel career.
And
Yeah.
the kid looked up and said, "Do your fucking job."
The kid's like, "Don't patronize me. I'm 14." Luke number.
Sorry, a couple more notes about Chopper. I did
Oh, yes,
forget him.
please
I
do.
would have included him on my list.
You did forget him?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
crazy.
wasn't thinking Rebels. I don't think I would have put him in my top 3 though, or I guess looking at what was eliminated in my top 7. Yeah, he would have been not on my list. He would have been on yours, but
Really? Okay.
I like him, especially the scene after Kanan dies when he goes up and holds Hera's hand. That's a very emotional beat for me. I've never been that fond of his arm mechanic design thing where he has like arms and he's an astromech. It just feels like almost unfair.
A hat on a hat. Yeah, it's like,
kinda.
choose one.
I do like it, but I like it for the animation. It is a little more jarring when it happens in live action, and they do it really well in the live action. But to me, that's like such an animated like feature, like and little arms, so he can like literally like make salutes and gestures and stuff with.
Mhm. I think
don't
that's
know.
the part of
He's like a little
Rebels-
Italian guy, though. He's always speaking with his hands.
I think that's the part of Rebels that feels most adolescent, not in a bad. Well, I guess this one is in a bad way. Like whenever Ezra acts or Zeb acts like a childish and like a comedic humor for a kids show, it doesn't bother me at all because it's a kids show and I'm able to accept it for what it is. But when Chopper does it, it does kind of bother me, and I don't know why.
I agree.
Like he's
I'm
an
in the same
astromech,
boat,
and when
yeah.
he's an astromech, and when he pops his arms out and puts them on his hips, it's like, dude, put those away. I
Because
don't know.
Sassy.
There,
He is
yeah,
sassy.
I agree though. I know what you mean. That's why I was saying I like Chopper, but my problem is that I like all the other Ghost Crew better than Chopper.
That's
Mhm.
fair. I think that's a fair critique. I just disagree with it though. It doesn't bother me at all, but it is a kid's show, and obviously, yeah, if you saw that for the first time in live action, if he was made to do that and you just saw that, it would immediately take you out of it. But I feel like they made that translation very well where they didn't overdo it with Chopper in live action, because they definitely can. I can't even think of all the different things that he has done in the cartoons that they would never be able to show in live action just because of how awful
How
and
horrendous
ridiculous it is.
Oh.
Yeah,
Straight
and
murder.
just all the war crimes he's committed.
Lucas
Luke,
Taylor.
number 3.
My number
Just trying to
3.
think of where we went. Did you do your number 3 yet?
No, you said
No.
Luke. Though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Luke.
BD1. I almost want to put a picture on the screen, but I'm not editing, so I won't hold you to it. But he is just such a fun little good boy. He was designed to look and act like a dog.
You're
He's,
talking about the droid from the Jedi.
yeah, he's Cal
Video
Kestis's droid companion from Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. And he's a video game mechanic for a lot of it. You use him to navigate the world and
Yep.
give you stim packs and stuff and stun enemies. But in universe as a character and as a droid design, he is just such a cute little guy, and I love him so much.
Yeah, I do
There are
too.
BD units in Mando season 3, I think, in Pelimato's garage, and that's the only time we see him in live action. But they look amazing. They look and act like a dog, and that makes me so happy.
It is. I wonder the scale on which you can determine when you're making a droid how lifelike you want it to be or how pet-like you want it to be.
Yeah.
Because that one's definitely much more on the pet area, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
There's other droids that are just like, you're basically just a person. This one, they're like, no. This one's going to be basically just a pet.
Yeah, because when you first find him, he's just like kind of chilling around, sad that he lost his last human, basically, like a dog would be if his human died until the next human came along.
I don't even remember that.
It was Eno Cordova's dog, or droid, BD1.
Oh, that's right. It was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good droid. I like him a lot. And he's cute.
He's so cute.
Number 3, Matthew.
My number 3 is L3. The chances of
Yes.
that. Yeah, I like L3 a lot.
Oh, I forgot L3.
Oh my
She-
gosh. I knew it. I knew you guys forgot something.
She would have been high on my list.
Yeah, it's
that
not-
is such a good droid.
I was a little disappointed. I feel like Luke. I feel like you're a big L3 apologist. I don't know.
Apologist.
No, I
No
like
need to apologize for her. Just a fan.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge quite a bit. I think that she does great voice work in that movie and Solo. I like the sassiness. I feel like in that era of Star Wars, we were introduced to BB-8, K2SO, L3, and I feel like that was really a peak era of like being able to create new versions of droids that we've never seen before. And I feel like L3 was that. And all three of those droids I just mentioned are very distinct and different. Yeah, and I think that after K2SO, you were like, okay, another kind of sassy droid, and they completely do something different with it. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say that was the only thing I can say bad about L3 is that she was coming off of K2SO's coattails.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's it. Like after that, you're kind of like, okay, they're kind of trying to do the same thing again.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit different.
But it worked. It's
They did
liberation.
do it differently. Yeah, and I really liked it. I don't know. I really liked the whole thing about droid rights. I thought that was really funny. I obviously like the little mutiny that she tries to do and how it does have plot
Yep.
significance to it and helps them get out of there and everything like that. And then obviously the death is one of the
Exactly.
most emotional things in I don't want to say all of Star Wars, but it might be
Ooh.
all of Star Wars.
Tune in to our deaths ranked. Did we do that already?
Yeah, we did. And I had L3 pretty high.
Yeah, I was like,
I will yield the time to Luke then to discuss more.
I was like, this sounds vaguely familiar.
It was extremely emotional. And when she says, "What's happening to me?" it's such a human moment that we don't know
Yes.
what happens after death. And she's a droid, though, so it doesn't matter. And we really don't know what happens after death for droids, even less. And
We know what
Lando's
happens
so-
after her. She became one with the ship.
But how much, though? Because it sounds like kind of slavery.
But C-3PO later says that your ship has the most peculiar dialect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she definitely lives on to an extent. But yeah, that whole sequence, and that's when Han gets to fly the Falcon for the first time. That's a great sequence.
Yeah.
L3, big fan. That line of hers, "I'm so glad we took this job."
Yeah.
was-
In
feel
the
like
trailer.
It was in the trailer.
It's
I
a
was
great
gonna say
moment.
it feels like it was almost made for the trailer
Yeah.
because it just we talked about trailers also, and Solo was our pretty unanimous highest ranked, right? If I remember correctly. Or you guys like the Rise of Skywalker more than I do, but
The Rise of Skywalker song. is
Solo
great.
was really
Yeah, the
high
music
on all of our
alone.
lists, and it was because that line fits so perfectly in the trailer, almost better than it does in the movie.
Yeah.
But I cannot say enough good things about L3.
Maybe we should do like emotional moments ranked because I feel like they're very different than deaths.
Yeah. That'd be a good one. I'd like to do that.
Yeah, because I feel like
Emotional moments, it would have to exclude deaths because
I don't know. Maybe
there's enough of an overlap. Though,
I
that
don't
we
know
would-
if I don't know if I would include deaths to be honest.
I'm also okay recycling material because I'm pretty sure that was like episode 6 or 7
Yeah,
at this
we
point.
forgot
we're-
about it.
Yeah. As Luke was like going on this tangent, I'm like, I do remember talking about this now.
yes, yeah.
Oh shit! What was I about to say? I was going to say one more thing about L3, but no, I forget.
Was it the way her and Lando salute at the same time when they go to hyperspace?
No, but
That's
they
fun.
do have a nice rapport with each other. I
Mhm.
like how they're on the same wavelength.
And what if I don't elect to go to Kessel? I
Yeah.
like that moment.
It's a good accent.
All right. Well, if I think of it, I'll come back. Moving on to that was your number 3, right? Number
Was.
2s.
Number 2s.
Number
Wait, did you do
2.
your 3?
Yeah, Chopper.
All right,
I started
yeah, we
with number
did.
2s. I'm trying to mix it up, but it's just making me more confused than it's worth. So I should just stick to the same order.
yes, hey, it was your call, my friend.
Going back to Luke, our number 2.
Number 2.
I'll go. I got number 2.
Is it R2?
It is. It's R2D2.
R2's a good droid.
R2 is number 2?
Number 2, R2D2, the GOAT, in my opinion. No, not really, because I have number
You
1,
have number
obviously. But the original trilogy GOAT, right? I mean, obviously,
The original trilogy GOAT of droids.
when you think of Star Wars, there are a lot of things that you think about, but I feel like R2D2 is one of the first things, right? In my opinion, like when you think about like iconography and everything like that, you think Darth Vader, maybe you get someone who thinks of Boba Fett, but I feel like you also think of R2D2. And oh man, it's so hard to talk about R2D2 and not C3PO because they are an iconic duo, but he is the perfect half to C3PO because C3PO is the straight shooting, like doesn't appreciate the sass, just like get to business type droid, and R2D2 is kind of the wily, free-spirited one. Although as I'm saying this out loud, it's kind of the opposite almost at the same time because R2D2 was given the mission from Obi-Wan to go find Leia on Tatooine, and then to go find Leia, and then he goes down and he kind of starts to ignore C3PO. Oh man, I don't know. I should have thought about this more now because I'm doubting myself. But regardless, R2D2, one of the best droids in all of Star Wars.
Yeah,
number
R2 is
2.
great.
I have said before that I don't like C3PO, but I do respect him in how important he is to the R2 character because I love R2. He was high on my list as well, and
Me too.
he would be little to nothing without C3PO. You need a translator and someone to play off of,
Yeah.
and C3PO does that great. I will say in terms of their duo, R2 definitely carries most, if not all, the load in terms of likability and charm for me personally. But yeah, I love R2. I love that you don't never know what he's saying, and if you're in a bad mood, you can say that he's just saying the most heinous insults imaginable, and if you're feeling a little bit more whimsical, you could be like, oh, C-3PO's just overreacting. He didn't say anything that bad.
Which is pretty much canon, though. I mean, that's how they treat him a lot in like the comics and everything. Whenever he says something, because his, what's it called, title blurb or whatever, where you see his
Text box? Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think that's
it's still just
it.
beeps and boops and everything, but everyone's reaction was like, R2, you can't say that and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Or you've made this joke before about on Ankh-To when Luke says, watch the language.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is canon. I
I
think
said
he
that
is,
in our best insults in Star Wars, that R2 is just railing into Luke and everything that he's done for the last however long, 5-10
Should we
years.
stop this podcast? We're referencing ourselves.
Oh, but it's in a different context now.
everything changes with context.
Does.
Matthew, you're number 2.
Number 2 is easy. If he is the little droid in the Bad Batch, I believe he's also in Clone Wars, but I really, really liked him.
He was Cad Bane's little servant man for a while, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
that. Okay.
I mean that.
I did not know that was a Z on your paper. So when you
Yeah.
told me to Google it, it came up as some sort of droid from what's it called, Knights of the Old Republic or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, it came up like some Pike Syndicate droid or something. I was like, oh, Matt must have really liked this game more than I thought. I guess we'll just go with it.
No, I mean
Easy. Okay.
he's very fun. He's very useful. And then his death when his lights go out is so emotional. I feel like in Bad Batch as well. You just kind of follow that character and then until he gets got. And I think it's I don't know. I like him a lot.
I'll be honest, I don't really remember his death scene. When his lights go out?
Yeah, I feel like it's so emotional.
It must be season 2? I
Yeah,
just
it
watched
is.
season 3.
Yeah, I think it is season 2. Yeah, it's season 2.
Is it on Camino when they're escaping? Was it the end of season 1?
I think. Fuck, I don't know, man. I didn't again. Next to no preparing for this.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, that's one of those characters that like, stick with me, and I feel like, he is kind of the annoying droid as well. I also like his design where it looks like he should have legs or could have legs, but just doesn't. Like just
I
little
like that
nubs.
he can choose his height, how high he
He
can
flies,
fly. I
yeah.
feel like when like other droids fly, I'm trying to think of it. Well, like or like speeders. I think his
Mhm.
repulsor would act more like a speeder, but he can go a lot
Yeah.
higher. He can
And
fly.
I feel like that, to move it back to R2 real quick, is that I love R2, obviously, but then in the prequels, he really does kind of irk me a little bit because I feel like they kind of know R2, and then they give him all these different, I know this is not a hot take, but they give him all those different things that he can do, which really work out for the animated shows. But it is just so jarring to me still watching
Mhm.
the prequel. Oh, I also just, a friend of the pod, Sway, was in town, and we watched A New Hope. And I feel like if we watch those movies with her, she's gonna be so confused to be like, well, why didn't R2 do it? It's one of those things where like we all know, but having someone else watch is gotta be so confusing. But
Why
anyway,
didn't he use those little jets in his legs to fly away?
Yeah,
It's like,
it was-
well, that doesn't really come up again.
it was so funny when we were watching when Boba Fett, I think it's Boba Fett now that I think about it, in on Tatooine, when we first go to the Falcon, and she's like, oh, it's like a Mandalorian helmet. Like, oh yeah, it's Boba Fett. She's like,
Oh,
that's all he's in it for? And I was like, yeah, he's not really in this much.
Yeah.
that is crazy to see Boba Fett and point out that it's a Mandalorian helmet and not know
Yes,
who it
well,
is.
that is the sway way. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that droid. But
The thing I
think it's
like
cool.
about AZ
Mhm.
is that AZ is very smart, has a lot of information that's very
Yeah.
helpful, and is a very useful droid. Like he flies, like he kind of like transforms himself into like a little speeder, and
Yeah.
like you can kind of fly with him and everything, which makes it like the perfect combination of necessary but also annoying because you would
Mhm.
never hang out with that droid voluntarily. I feel like no one
Mhm.
likes that droid, but
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Damn it, AZ's here!" Like, okay, well we need AZ because of all the
He's-
stuff that he provides, even though no one likes him.
Like a combination of like Hu Yang, C-3PO,
and then someone
R2.
useful.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the knowledge. Anyway,
Luke, number 2.
Number 2. Took the word right out of my mouth. Hu Yang.
and as I said it, I was like, we're going to number 1. There's no way Hu Yang's number 1 for anybody, but god damn it.
No, he's my number 2,
Yeah.
but I really, really like him. I think I was in my head, I was going through all the droids in all the Disney Plus shows because I think they just do droids so well. And I don't know if it's because they don't have like that many droids in the prequels or original trilogy or sequel. It's like just the 1 or 2 that you see a lot of, and the shows do it kind of similar, but there's been so many shows that they have so much screen time, and also there's just more screen time on the shows. But I'm not going to say Hu Yang was my favorite part of Ahsoka because, I really like Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll and a whole lot of other parts of Ahsoka, but he was such a great part. And part of it is David Tennant's performance is one of the more endearing droids that I can think of. A few of the moments that just stick out when I was thinking about this is when Hera asked about Anakin, about Ahsoka's old master, and
Yeah.
she said, "What was he like?" And I remember watching that with you guys, and I was like, "Wow, what a hard question! Like, what do you say to sum up Anakin Skywalker to someone like this?"
Yeah.
And he just looks at her and says, "Intense." And it's like, "Yep, that's perfect. That is the exact right answer." He's great in the Clone Wars. I love that arc with the younglings. That's a lot of fun. As a droid design, I think he looks really cool. He has just the right amount of human look. Like, he's obviously humanoid. He's got arms and legs, but he's got like the extra 2 little baby arms to help with lightsaber training, and his eyes can emote a little bit, which I think goes a long way in making a droid more empathetic and relatable as a character. Big fan.
Yeah, I like Hu Yang a lot.
I was very pleasantly surprised with how much Hu Yang content we got in Ahsoka because
Yeah.
I remember he was hardly in the trailer at all. And when it was revealed that he was going to be in it, it was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And then he was a really main character in a lot of it. And he also had a very emotional part in Ahsoka as well when Sabine goes missing and then they find Hera and them find Hu Yang holding Sabine's helmet.
Mhm.
And he says, I told them to stay together. They never stay together. They never listen or whatever
never
he says.
listen.
They never
Mhm.
listen. And it's a very emotional part. I don't know. It's very, I think maybe it's just like an easy move to do because with droids, since they're not human, you
Yeah.
already kind of feel like a little distant and a little like they're literally dehumanized. And then when they have an emotional moment like that, it like just like hits a little bit harder. And I remember that was one part where
Yeah.
he said that line in the middle of that episode. And I remember being like, oh man, that is so tragic. Like this poor droid is like going through it right
Yep.
now.
I think you also then start to think about droids and the fact that he's probably had multiple moments like this within his lifespan already. And the fact that
25,000 years old.
exactly, and
Mhm.
so many friendships have come and gone, and
I mean,
he's
he
still
lived
around.
through the Jedi Purge. He knew every single Jedi and lived through all of that.
Yeah.
That is.
And it's like Hu Yang specifically is like weirdly a tragic figure, and he's still
I mean,
he's still bubbly.
there was never anything as intense as the Purge, but he lived through several Jedi Purges, so to speak. He lived through the whole High Republic, the whole Sith War. Who knows? I mean, that only goes back like 1,000 years.
I take it back. This is the second droid who should be on antidepressants.
I remember, based on just the trailers, I don't remember if we talked about it in our Ahsoka predictions, but those are fun to go back and listen to because we were so wrong. I remember thinking, like, how are they going to explain how Ahsoka and Hu Yang find each other? And rarely is it the right answer to just not talk about it. But that worked out so perfectly. That show had so much to do. It still has so much to do. If we wasted even half an episode with Ahsoka and Hu Yang, just like, I mean, who knows what that story is? I'm sure they didn't just bump into each other at the supermarket, but I am glad that they're saving that for some other time, another place, another
Yeah.
medium, probably. And I'm excited to see it, but I don't need to see it for the context of Ahsoka. You can just kind of insert this droid, I mean, literally at any point in the timeline, and it's acceptable.
And I think they should do that a bit more, honestly. I feel like Hu Yang is a great thread through a lot of these stories that we're seeing. It's like
I thought we were going to see him in the Acolyte. I was kind of surprised we didn't.
Honestly, like, doesn't it make more sense? Like, they're doing a lot of these, they're doing Yoda, they're doing 3PO, but it's like, man, like, Hu Yang feel like he would make more sense because he is like, we were just talking about Tales of the Empire, how we're a little tired of seeing Vader. We're like, he's not a surprise anymore. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, what Hu Yang is like a character that, like, is he came on screen for people that don't know who this is, or are going to be like, this is a cool new droid? And I feel like for us, it's like, oh yeah, that would make so much sense. And he's like kind of underdeveloped, not underdeveloped, but like, you know, he's been
underutilized.
Yes, he's been through a lot of stuff. So.
Especially because in the Acolyte, he could have fit so easily. Like, they have training sequences on Coruscant with younglings. That was his job at this time period. You have the droid, you have the whatever prosthetics from the Ahsoka show, and that feels like a missed opportunity. But I digress. Hu Yang, thumbs up.
Hu Yang.
Yeah,
Hu Yang gang.
absolutely. Going on to our
Fire.
number ones, but before we do that, let's stop and do a couple honorable mentions. I will kick off with one that I was really hoping was going to sneak my way onto this list, and that is the armchair droids from the Acolyte that were piloting the ship and then got turned off, and they just like kind of turned back into the pilot seats for somebody else to take manual control. Super stupid thing, but I remember watching that with you guys, and as soon as we saw that, I feel like all three of our breaths were taken away. We were like, oh my god, that is so cool.
It really
and
was.
once again, it was just a stupid thing. I know it's not real, but I'm just like, that makes so much sense.
Why
Like,
would you
how have we not
design
thought of that before?
I agree. That is great. Man, that's pretty good.
Luke, any honorable mentions? I don't think you did, actually. I think your list was pretty dwindled down.
It doesn't, but I have one that I would like to talk about. The Imperial torture droid, not just because you have a toy sitting in my eyesight, but
That's a great one.
in terms of sentience. We kind of already talked about how the Empire doesn't mess with that, so to speak. But assuming every droid has a level of sentience, do you think the probe droid like is designed to be hateful and like, I don't know, I don't have the right word to say
Snitching.
rude, but like, do you think he likes his job, or you think this is torture for him also to just go around torturing people?
That is a really good question that I'm pretty sure has an answer that I don't remember, because I'm trying to think of the torture droid, the reconfigured torture droid from the Alphabet Squadron trilogy of books. There's a droid in there who's one of the main characters, and he's a reprogrammed torture droid. Did he talk about his previous days as a torture droid? Because I'm pretty sure he remembered it. I'm pretty sure he talked about it.
I can't remember that either. How far are you in those books?
I finished book 2, so I haven't started book 3.
That is one of the most captivating storylines in all of Star Wars for me, when him and Erika Quell, the main character, crash land on a planet, and he starts like deteriorating and breaking down because he sustained damage, and he reverts to his old programming. So he was a torture droid and was reprogrammed to be a therapist, and then he was like,
Talk about
space
rehabilitated,
therapist, space therapist, so to speak. But he was like working with Erika with the rehabilitation program in the New Republic, and because she was an ex-Imperial, and then they were together, and he started reverting back to a torture droid. And the idea of your therapist literally mentally and emotionally torturing you from that position is the most scary thought imaginable. That is such an interesting story beat, and it's like the worst hell I could ever imagine.
I know I mentioned this before, but my therapist looked like Ham and Noah, that's all.
Big neck boy. Man. I'm excited to read the third book of that series so that we can talk more about it. But Luke, I'm really glad to hear you talk about that, because I really did not like that sequence, because she was just stuck by herself and that droid on that planet for a long time. And I felt like every time they kept cutting back to it, I was just like, oh, geez, I got to go through this thing again.
Don't you like the show
But that is
Lost,
true. That is
though?
a very good way
The
of getting
pacing was
back to
pretty
it.
slow.
No, Lost is amazing. Don't get me started on that.
The same thing.
Oh my
It's
god,
worth
I watched
watching it. I know everyone gets lost around seasons 3.5 to 4, but stick with it.
Is it
Was
because,
it 6 seasons?
I think it was
Yeah,
7.
it's about that.
Yeah, it was the
6, maybe 7. It's about season 3.5 to 4 where it really starts to fall off. But stick with it.
I love it when people complain that Lost its roots as like a plane crash show and turned into like a fantasy show with time travel and stuff. As if there wasn't a man that was paralyzed that started to walk and a dead guy walking around in the pilot of the episode. But whatever, we can talk about Lost some other time. I just rewatched one episode randomly, and it ended up being the episode with Shannon, and I was like, damn it. It's like gotta be one of the worst episodes. I don't care about Shannon.
Unless it's Boone's death. But
It was
Alas,
after that.
this isn't a podcast about Lost apologetics, although
What?
I would love to. I have a lot of thoughts on that show.
We do the segment called More for Thought sometimes.
I know. I was debating that, but I'm like, that would require almost having to rewatch the entire show just so I could talk about it again because
Of all
I'm
the shows
a
we have
few
to
years removed
The
from my
fact that-
most recent rewatch.
Are you thinking though? You're like, I'm really looking forward to the first 2 seasons, and then
Yes,
I'm really not
it
after
always
that.
gets me in every time. I'm just like, oh my gosh, what's this bunker? Oh my god, what are
I-
these numbers?
I
Where's
agree.
Walt?
yeah,
I remember
Walt.
watching that show live and
it's
being
turning
like,
into a
this is a
20-year-old man.
great show, and then it just
No, it didn't nosedive. It got a little worse, but of all the shows that we have to rewatch for this podcast, we cannot dedicate to 7 seasons of Lost.
No, we
or maybe
cannot.
to 6.
Exactly. That's where I was at too. Even though I do like the guy who created it, but he is pretty well known for not being able to stick
Damien
the landing
Lindelof?
when it comes to ending things.
and
J.J.
J.J. Abrams.
Abrams.
But the Damien Lindelof is the creator, right? Isn't
Yeah, there's
J.J.
both of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There we go. That's Star Wars tie-in. We'll do a Lost More
There we
for
go.
Thought.
We got
we
back
gotta
there.
do it.
We got back there. Matthew, any honorable mentions?
R5.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for him, man. What a life he could have had.
I wanted to talk about him sooner because obviously my intro joke was about him. But
Yes.
after reading the short story about him in from a certain point of view and everything too, about how he knew that R2D2 was going to be significant and he kind of like blew his own motivator.
Mhm.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, it's so good. And then obviously he kind of like somehow gets fixed back up, maybe by the Jawas and resold because we see him in the Mandalorian, and
Yeah.
then eventually by what did we say her name was? Pelimato.
Belly, yeah.
And helping out Mandalorian doing his missions. I remember it was like episode 3 of this podcast. Luke had to give an impassioned speech defending R5's character
Yeah.
in the Mandalorian, and I think about that a lot. But
Yeah, me too. I was waiting for this. I have an R5 figure that I completely forgot to bring.
yeah, R5D4, a classic.
It is.
Terrible motivator, so I've heard. Anyways, moving on.
Well,
Number
Anyone else have
ones.
any honorable mentions? I have 1 or 2 more that I would like to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on the
'Cause
ball,
I have
my
quite a
friend.
few actually. We
Oh,
could.
geez.
So
Lola from Kenobi. Not because I particularly like that droid.
Mhm.
I didn't have any thoughts about it really, but I remember the marketing around Kenobi focused surprisingly heavily on Lola. I think they thought that was going to be
Yeah.
a more marketable and sellable toy than it was. I know I do have a Lola plush that I gave to my son, and I can tell you he's never seen any Star Wars, and that's the toy he plays with least. I don't care about Lola. It just feels like such a swing and a miss. And then when I rewatch Kenobi, like the first episode, it's like, oh, where's Layla and Lola? It's like, who's Lola?
there were very few droids that I thought of when I was trying to make my master list that I just completely intentionally left off my list, and unfortunately Lola was one of them. Spoiler alert, Dio was another one.
Yeah.
Another one I thought of, and I was like, oh no, never mind. Okay, keep moving on.
I know. I'm worried doing honorable mentions before we do our number ones in case I take someone's number 1, but it's not Lola and it's not Dio.
No.
Lola is always a little too meta for me too, because when he has like her little ear things, I don't know how you would describe it.
Your things is good.
It looks like a Mickey Mouse outline. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, how much of that was intentional,
It had
Disney?
to have been. Like
You know?
a little Easter egg.
Yeah, exactly.
Two
I,
for
I
one.
think it was, and that's why I'm just like, well, whatever. But going back to Ned B, I was actually holding back when I was trying to shit on Kenobi, but you brought it up, so here we go. I said Ned B was in the show the perfect amount. Lola was way too much
Yeah.
screen time.
Correct.
You're right. They absolutely thought she was going to be the next big thing, and just absolutely wasn't. But every time she was on screen, it was just like, no one cares about you.
Nope.
Oh,
There
she
was
had-
plot significance.
there was plot
There was,
relevance.
yep, because she was like hacked or whatever by Reva, and I get all that. That makes sense. And then she caused a little mischievous in their little secret rebel base and everything. But yeah, overall,
Thumbs
kind of
down.
overutilized. I didn't really care for Lola that much, but cute as a button. I'll give him that.
Rattle them off,
What
Maxwell.
else
Let's
we
see
were?
who you got.
Number ones.
Oh, I thought we were going to have more honorable mentions.
They're on my phone. I forget who else I had on my
Oh,
honorable
okay,
mention
sorry.
list.
That's fine. We'll cut that.
The main one that I really wanted to talk about was the Acolyte chair droids because
Yeah. All right.
exceptional,
cool.
exceptional design.
Moving on. Number ones. No, let's just get to it. Matt. No, wait. Who did I say had it? Matt. No, Luke.
K2SO?
Yes, Luke's
Yeah,
number one.
I have K2SO.
All right, let's talk about K2SO.
Yeah,
I thought we were gonna be in the Office situation, like when we did our TV shows ranked, and the Office was all of our number ones. I don't know who your number one is, Max, but I'm shocked it's not K2SO. It was such an easy call when I started making this list. It's
Really?
I don't think it's close.
Yeah,
You don't have any idea who my number one might be?
I mean, I have ideas, but I'm shocked that you think that they're better than K2SO.
So yeah, I agree. Is it
Okay.
a certain spherical
Well, let's
droid?
just talk about all of them in general, I guess. Yeah, it's absolutely BB-8. BB-8 is
BB-8 was on my list. And I
the
forgot
best
to transpose
Star
it.
Wars droid. I mean, it's
BB-8's
basically
great.
just R2-D2, but improved in literally every single way.
I know.
Cuter, more useful, funnier, better impact.
Similar to K2SO is just C3PO, but better and as well.
Speaking of my
I
number one,
disagree with that. No, that's different.
my number one is indeed C3PO because I've always liked the straight man better in comedy anyway, and I feel like C3PO is a straight man to R2, and I feel like 3PO has some sort of logic and reason, but he's also just kind of a sassy bitch, and I think he's very funny.
And he's always very annoyed too, and I feel like you can relate to that whenever I hear stories
Yeah.
of like you and your friend group growing up. I get the idea that you were the C3PO, where you were the only one with a little bit of like, guys, let's not do this right now.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was.
You're looking around like, surely I'm not the only one with sense here,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what it was. With that being said, he's actually my number two, and K2SO is my number one because he is fucking great, and K2SO is game changer.
For how much I don't like C3PO, The Rise of Skywalker did swing him heavily into the favorable era.
When I made my list,
area.
I wrote down C3PO in parentheses from The Rise of Skywalker.
Yep.
That is by far the best iteration of
He's
C3PO.
very good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he's the actual heart in that episode.
is.
And it's very good.
He's just taking one
And-
last look at his friends.
They do it so well too, where it's like emotional. He's the heart and everything, but then they also kind of 180, and they're just
Yeah.
like, okay, we wiped his mind. Like he's basically back now. Like you kind of thought he was
Yeah.
gonna die, then he's not. But then he has like the funniest comedic moments too, when
Yep.
he's learning everything for the first time again.
Yes.
And then he says something about Babu Frick, and he's
My
like,
oldest
"Oh,
friend."
Babu Frick, he's my oldest friend."
Yeah.
Like 10 minutes ago. That's so funny.
My-
That's so good.
My favorite line C3PO has is when they're in the trash compactor in A New Hope, and he's like, "Oh my God, they're dying!" and they're like yelling. It's like I look forward to that
Curse my
moment.
rusty innards.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so good. It's such a great moment. There's so many moments like that that shine through for me, but I always loved 3PO. BB-8's also an amazing choice, obviously. Obviously, no complaints with BB-8. K2SO is the best as well. I mean,
Yeah, K2SO was my original number 3. I assumed that he was going to be Matt's number 1. It was
He's the
both your
only
number 1. The
droid
only reason
figure
I
I
didn't
have.
was because some people's lists got hacked a little more than others.
Yeah.
But yeah, K2SO again. It's like I said before, cheap because you're dehumanizing this character, right? So then when they have an emotional moment, such as a death, it like hits you twice as much because you're like,
Yep.
oh man, this is like sad and it's emotional. They're dying, but also I didn't even realize I cared about this character
Yes.
as much as I do.
Yep.
Because a droid, you just think of it's like a computer, right? Like, oh, my
Yep.
computer died. Like, that's a bitch. Got to go to Best Buy and get a new one. But
Mhm.
this one, you're like, that is a person, man.
Yeah.
I am
Ugh.
very excited to see him in Andor season 2. He has been confirmed.
Yeah.
That's going to be great. The intro of K2SO from like choke slamming Jin as she runs out of that prisoner
You
transport.
are being rescued.
Yeah.
Is that what she says?
Congratulations, you are being
Yeah.
rescued. Yeah. All the way up to his death. One of the most impactful deaths and one of the best introductions, and everything in between is also
Was he
exceptional.
the first death of the crew?
he might have been. I think it's
Yeah.
either him or Bodhi. I don't remember.
Yeah, it
the
was
exact
K2SO.
editing.
Trust me, it was not Bodhi.
Big Bodhi guy here.
This is
No.
for you, Galen.
It would.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, it was K2SO.
Because I didn't quite remember that, but I remember watching the movie for the first time in theaters, and it was when K2 died, so he might have been the first one where it started to dawn on me. I was
Yes.
like, oh my god, and then I'm like,
Oh, yep,
yeah, like all
same
these,
thing.
they're gonna go, aren't
Yep.
they? And then yeah, his death was. I'm going to say the second most emotional because I think Baze's death might be the most emotional when he's looking back at Chirrut's body. After kind of being converted, he's a believer at the end. But he has a great one where he's holding off the Imperials from coming in while they're climbing up, and he's telling them how they can broadcast the signal out and everything.
Yeah, that's another one of those quotes that I drop all the time that is not like an actual quote. It just is in my head when it happens a lot when I'm like playing with my son and he's like at the park or something and I say, climb.
That's
You can
hilarious.
still broadcast the plans to the fleet if they open the shield gate.
Oh man, it's so good. What are his last words? Do you know?
Goodbye. Locking
Oh.
the shield doors now. Goodbye.
Oh man,
Or the blast doors now.
Alan Tudyk also.
it's
just
not going to
so
come up
good.
on camera, but I am getting goosebumps.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. I gotta rewatch Rogue One.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. We didn't talk a whole lot about BB-8.
Who's your number?
but
Yeah,
that was-
BB-8. BB-8 is good too.
It's hard to follow up now with all that.
BB-8 was originally my number 3, but I forgot to put him on my list.
Okay. Well, he was my actual number 1, so that's fine. It would have get bumped off.
I didn't
anyway.
put
That
him
thumbs
on-
up scene to Finn. I mean,
Yeah, it's
it doesn't
great.
get better than that.
With a little igniter, the
Yeah.
light thing. Yeah, that's really
Which
good.
works, unlike some of the chopper stuff. Which
Exactly.
is odd. But yeah, BB-8's the best. I mean, also you've never seen a droid like that in all of Star Wars, and they have a lot of different types of droids in Star Wars for the 6 movies previously, and that is just completely new and out of the box, and I loved it. But like, he's fun. He's. I love also when he's in in the Falcon, and then all of his like wires come out and he like sticks to it so he doesn't like fall down.
Mhm.
Yeah,
He's
that's
just
awesome.
literally so practical also, and just so cool to see.
I love the Last Jedi opening scene when he's fixing Poe's X-wing and it's like a
Oh, yeah.
leaky
Yes.
thing, and he's just like keeps plugging them.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, it's like, is that really how it works? But like, who cares? That's a fun sequence.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It is.
That's funny. Yeah, and then he puts his head down and he just kind of like jams it and everything. I don't know. He's so funny too. I don't know. I like him.
The only thing I don't
it's-
love with BB-8 is how he is present for the when they charge on the Star Destroyer and the Rise of Skywalker on those space horses. What are you doing here, BB-8? Like R2 needs to be on Endor to open the bunker, and then he gets shot. Obviously, what's BB-8 coming here for? Go in someone's X-wing. There's like 1,000 ships up there. That's your job. That's your bread and butter, buddy.
I have such a complicated relationship with The Rise of Skywalker because I want to love that movie so much, but I just don't. Because that whole sequence, I'm just like, oh, this is so cool. They're riding into battle on these space horses. And then in the back of my head, always, it's just like,
One proton
really?
torpedo.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
was this the best idea? Surely there was
Yeah.
something else.
It's a cool idea.
But-
It's just not the best execution of it.
Yeah, so I don't draw the line at that scene with BB-8.
Yeah, they do a
To
lot
me,
of
it's-
that where it's a cool idea, poor execution, and then they have stuff where it's like Palpatine, where it's a poor idea but great execution. It's like, oh, Palpatine's so cool in The Rise of Skywalker. Oh, but why is he there at all? Oh, but look what we did.
What an emotional roller coaster. And it makes C-3PO the best. Yeah.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere.
I know. You don't expect it, and then it does.
Really
They did a
fucks
good
with
job,
it.
too, of differentiating BB-8's storyline by not just having him be a third wheel to R2-D2 and C-3PO. I mean, he had, like, his whole thing and everything.
Yeah, they did that with Dio to him. They're just like, there's another droid. Fuck
Yeah,
it.
and that's probably why Dio wasn't on any of our lists.
Yeah.
'Cause he had no autonomy.
Nope.
By far my least favorite toy that I have, Dio.
Yeah.
It's a wheel. He doesn't stand.
You can't stand him up, and he's so small, too. How do you play with that?
Don't like him.
Even with the 6-inch Black Series, he's that big.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that said, too, the droids really do make really good action figures because
Some
all
of
of their what's it called?
Their
appendages.
Joints. Yeah. All of their joints are like actual joints in like the character's like design, so it makes sense. You know, sometimes you have a character like Rey who's like just skinny, and then like she has to bend at the knee, so she has a fake joint. And you're looking at it, and you're like, that doesn't look real though. Like I can tell that's a toy.
That's
But
true.
with the droid toys, you're like, that's supposed to be a joint right there. That looks real.
Droid toys.
Yeah, it sucks when I realize my own misogyny, but it's not exactly that. But all girl toys suck. Like every single girl Black Series figure.
Let's get
It's
into
because
it.
they're small and skinny and they have small feet. It's hard to play with them and position them.
I was gonna
It's not fair, but
Rey
they do
one-
suck.
The Rey one specifically, I feel like has a huge head, and I feel like they're because like Daisy Ridley is really skinny, which is like a normal head, and I feel like in the Black Series they like overcompensate for it, where I always feel like she looks like she was wearing a helmet of herself.
Really, I haven't noticed that, but I got a lot of Rey toys. I have a lot of Black Series toys, and by and large, girls bad.
Do you think that was why in the 90s they came out with the Power of the Force toy line? Because they were like, how do we
Make everyone
make all of
jacked.
these characters more appealing to young kids? Let's just
It
make them
worked.
look jacked as fuck.
Got me into Star Wars.
All right. Well, anyway, that was our top 5 droid ranking. Does anyone have a force for thought?
I didn't prepare. I'm just gonna.
Don't do it. No, we don't today.
No.
All right. That's all
No,
right.
I'm gonna-
That's all right.
I'm gonna-
Tune in
I'm
next
gonna do
week.
it. You can turn off my video here. I need to. It's our whole thing, and I made so many good ones now
Hey.
because I've been rewatching Star Wars all summer. It's for those of you just listening. My notes are on my phone, which was recording me, and so now I'm no longer being recorded. But I'm gonna give you some good force for thought. Yes, the first 20 minutes of Return of the Jedi.
Jesus
We talked about it last
making your
week.
way through the OT. All right.
A new definition of pain and suffering as you are slowly digested over 1,000 years. The line that C-3PO gives about the Sarlacc pit.
Mm-hmm.
Does that imply
It keeps you alive.
that it keeps you alive long? Because like you'll
Well, no, it
die
just-
of dehydration in like 4 days. So that doesn't seem like that much of a problem.
It also doesn't make any sense because you wouldn't be alive for 1,000 years if you're just a human either. So it's not going to keep you alive more than your normal lifespan, even if it's feeding
Yeah.
you.
I mean,
No,
if it's just
I-
like my body, like after I die, yeah, do whatever you want. Suck it dry for 1,000 years.
Like a Capri Sun.
Yeah.
That's such a funny asterisk after that statement. Like if this was an ad on TV, it's like, but you'll die instantly. You'll just be digesting for 1,000 years.
And then we see like inside the Sarlacc pit in the Book of Boba Fett,
Yeah.
and it looks pretty deadly. I mean, Boba had to get that stormtrooper's breather to breathe, like you
Mhm.
suffocate. So it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to get eaten by the Sarlacc pit relative to any other form of death. That's all
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Fuck.
They talk a big game.
So glad you brought up Book of Boba Fett. What what was that stormtrooper doing in there? Are we just led to believe that something else happened around that time?
Yeah, there were no stormtroopers
He's probably
involved
combing
in
the.
that fight.
He's probably combing the desert.
Going in the desert. We ain't found shit. Oh, Spaceballs is such a great movie. Wouldn't we all agree?
Yeah, we would. We would.
It's something.
All right. Well, let us know what you think. Let us know if there's any droids that we missed or if you disagree or agree with any of our top 5. You can reach out to us on social media at Force for Thought, or you can email us at forceforthought@gmail.com.
See you, Sammy.